Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Career Chat. I'm Krista Harmon. I'm one of the Career Readiness Consultants for the Kent Intermediate School District in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And today I'm just thrilled to have Lindsey Tilley. She's one of the Senior Training Development Specialists at Amway Corporation here in Ada, Michigan. So welcome, Lindsey. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks so much for having me, Krista. I'm glad to be here.
So just to get us started, and we'll talk more about what your title means for young people who are like, what does that even mean? We'll get into that. But hey, let's take us back to your high school age, because students love to hear how you got from there to your current role. So give us just kind of what were you thinking back in high school and kind of how that evolved for you?
Absolutely. So I will tell you, pretty much for as long as I can remember, I have been torn between wanting to be an educator and wanting to be in the business field where I had an opportunity to interact with a diverse set of cultures around the world. So I have grown up knowing people that worked at Amway and got to travel a lot for business. So Amway specifically really opened up my eyes to that international component of working in the business world. And I was very fascinated by that. I've also been very drawn to education. So for much of my high school career, I did student assisting, where I would go into elementary school classrooms, even a few middle school classrooms, and do some kind of practice teaching at different levels, because I knew I was also very interested in working with young people.
So that global perspective, like the ability to work internationally was attractive to you, but you had a teacher's heart. And so you're like started kind of going down that teaching role, but also had a heart for business. So what did you end up deciding when you went off to college then? Did you pursue teaching or business? Or how'd you make that decision?
So let me be really honest. I have pinballed between these two things starting in college. So I changed my my major 4 times in college, which is not the most efficient and effective use of college funds. I'll tell you all that right now, because I really couldn't decide. I ended up deciding on a teaching degree because in my mind, a teaching degree was more specialized in, and I felt like if I didn't get that now, it would be much harder to go back for that later. Um, Whereas I felt there might be ways for someone with an English degree. English is my major. So I thought potentially I could work my way into a communications role in a business function, even with just an English degree. So I ended up pursuing an education degree finally. In college, I went to CMU for my undergrad. And when I graduated from Central Michigan, I immediately took my first job in business. So
I love that though.
Didn't go as planned.
Yeah, no, but I think it's great because you're really helping young people hear how you were pretty just strategic in choosing your major, that you knew doing student teaching down the road probably wasn't going to happen. So you just kind of did that when you were young, and that you had this backup plan in your head of how your English degree could be used. I'd love for young people to hear to be marketable, because sometimes I think young people pigeonhole themselves into a major that's so tight that doesn't give them a lot of wiggle room, right? So I love that. So you graduate with this teaching degree, you've done your student teaching, and how was that experience for you as far as the education degree? Is that positive?
Student teaching was very positive. The biggest takeaway for me in every single role that I've been in has been the opportunity to build relationships with people that I interact with. So I was thrilled with student teaching, being able to work. I worked primarily with a group of 10th graders and got to really know the students over the course of the semester, and really loved that. I graduated because of my pinballing between majors. I graduated from student teaching in December, which is a terrible time to get a teaching job. So then I was faced with another kind of unique situation where I was trying to decide, well, what do I do from now until next August, when I would likely even be eligible to find, full-time employment as an educator. And so of course, the logical choice was to do substitute teaching. And I found for me that was very unpleasant because there was no relationship building. It was just literally being in a room for just a short amount of time. Very difficult to connect with students because you're really just a space filler for the day. So that wasn't a good fit for me, and I was very unhappy doing that. And I said, I don't even want to do this for 6 months. So what kind of a job can I find for 6 months? Um, which then led me ironically into looking for temporary employment, and the role that I found was a temp position where I was going to be responsible for editing communication strategies. So they had a big brand um, symposium coming up, and they wanted somebody to look through all of these documents that had been written by a bunch of different employees and consolidate them into one big piece that felt like it had been written by one person. So they needed somebody to do this job for, 6 weeks or so. So it started as a very short term opportunity. I was happy to jump on board with that because it was something I felt like I could do, and it was stable for a little while, and then I'd figure out, do I need to go back to substitute teaching or whatever else? And what I would also encourage people to do, what I learned from that experience, is that 6-week job was something I was able to complete pretty quickly. And once you get in somewhere and do a good job, even if the job on paper at the beginning doesn't seem like something that would be particularly sustainable, they were then able to feed me a lot of other work. So I ended up staying there for almost 3 years. Um, my position became less temporary. They just extended my contract for year-long positions, and I had some really incredible experiences in that role. Got to really learn a lot about the business landscape, and and I ended up finding a ton of value in what was only supposed to be a 6-week assignment.
I think that's such an encouragement to young people, Lindsey, that sometimes they like, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? And they don't maybe step into a position because it's not where they want to be forever. And just as you showcased, it's going to give you a skill set that may lead to something else, that you might meet somebody. You're going to learn about things you never knew existed. I had a 1-year position that was supposed to be temporary. I lasted there 14 years. So again, such an encouragement to young people that if you see something, try it. Just try it in the beginning. Test it out. That's the beauty of being a young person as you start your career. So I love that part of your work journey, and that something that was supposed to be 6 weeks turned into 3 years. I love it. So communications, even as a job, did you even know that kind of job existed at the time? That kind of department? Was that new to you?
So, um, I often heard from the adults in my life growing up that communication seemed to be one of the biggest hurdles in the business landscape. One of the points of a lot of frustrations often grew out of poor communications. And I always had a sense that I really I like to write. I'm a big reader, and so it was one of those things that kept coming up. Like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I didn't really understand exactly what it would mean to be in communications. Um, but the more I got to know that role, and spent some time doing it, it's interesting how imperative being able to condense sometimes very complex information into ways that a broad audience can understand it, um, how that can make or break the success of a lot of corporate initiatives.
Fantastic.
Um,
Such an interesting field. And I know we'll come back to that because part of what you're doing now, we'll definitely come back to that. But I'd like to stick around a little bit. Those first 3 years you're at Amway, you're learning all sorts of things, developing skills, learning lots. But then what ended 3 years? Why did you leave? What happened? And then where did you go?
well, I will tell you, if there's one bit of advice I can give to people that are in a space of looking for roles or looking for new opportunities, it is to always um, do your very best to make a positive impression and to genuinely connect with the people that you work for and work with. Because to be honest, for me, after 3 years, it was the gentleman who I had done my student teaching with. He reached out to me and he said, there's going to be 2 openings in our English department this fall. So there hadn't been any openings. So I was not really missing anything at the school that I had student taught at. Certainly there were other jobs for other English teachers, other places, but honestly, I was liking what I was doing. And so I hadn't really looked for them. but he reached out and he said, it would make me very sad, if you didn't, at least throw your resume into the stack and consider coming back to be a teacher here. And I had that moment where it was like, again, another pinball moment. Here I am in business, and now I've got this, potential opportunity, certainly no guarantees, but an opportunity to imagine myself as an English teacher. And is that how I kind of see my path transitioning? And I decided that this was a moment to really give that a go. Because I knew that the heart of an educator was something that I didn't want to discount, and I thought it was something I needed to give a shot. And it was one of the moments where it felt like an opportunity here is knocking, and I need to just see how this pans out. And I did transition then. I was fortunate enough to get that one of those two positions at Northview High School, and then I spent 7 years in their English department. And I truly loved nearly every element of that job.
Give us 2 or 3 examples of what you loved about it.
There are so many incredible opportunities as a teacher to really feel like you can connect with this future generation. I have such respect for the stresses and the expectations on young people, and I was constantly impressed with how young people are able to really manage so many things that other generations have not had to deal with, and continue to show up and just be impressive. And I just found such energy from being around my students. I also got to spend a lot of time being a nerd about books, which is something that is near and dear to my heart. And that's pretty cool when you get to go in and be nerdy about things that you love. That was a real gift. And I think I worked with some of the best humans in the world. There's really special people in education, and I was very honored to be a part of that group.
So that's wonderful. So you got to go back and get into the classroom and be with students, doing that for 7 years. And then you had another a pivot. And I want to give you, it was networking again, wasn't it?
It was networking, yes.
Yeah, and I only know this for those of you that are listening because this next chapter is where Lindsey and I meet. So go ahead, Lindsey. What got you out of the classroom? Who recruited you?
So I was recruited out of the classroom into a role that was still very focused on education. And for me, in many ways, this was finally the convergence of my paths. So this was an opportunity to work at Kent Intermediate School District, which is really the business side in many ways of education. And so I was really excited to have an opportunity to be in more of this business type role, more of a consultancy role where I was working with educators and also with employers to try to bring students together. So doing the same work that Mrs. Harmon does. And I was very excited about that opportunity because it was going to stretch sort of some muscles that I wasn't using in the classroom. I will say, when I said that I loved almost everything about my teaching job, the one thing that was very difficult for me about education is it felt sometimes very confining. I mean, I was physically in the exact same space every day from September to end of May, early June. Like I never got to leave. I didn't see anything outside of those 4 walls all day long. I mean, barely enough time to run to the bathroom. So there, it's interesting how sometimes things that you don't think about in a certain role can start to drive you a little crazy. And that is one thing, that educators really don't have that much say in. I mean, I didn't have that many opportunities to shift my day to be to offer more, outside examples. I mean, we do a few field trips a year, but that's about it. So for me, that was something that actually started to wear on me a little bit as time went on. And I also didn't have as much opportunity. I worked with amazing people, but they were stuck in their classroom in their 4 walls all day. So I rarely saw, I mean, 4 of my closest friends were teachers in that building. And I rarely ever got to interact with them during the school day. We would call each other on our way home, and chat on the phone while we're in our own cars. So that was a strange thing for me about education that I didn't take into account when I was thinking about being a teacher. So again, an awesome thing to kind of think about is what that work environment looks like when you're starting to kind of plan out the career that you would like to be in.
I think that's such an important consideration, and why job shadows are so important, and for young people to literally go into the environment that they think they might like to work, so they can talk to people about these kind of things, or smell it, or hear it. It's such a different experience versus just reading about it on a a website, or taking the word of it from somebody that you know. So you got to work for the Kent Intermediate School District, and now combining both your education side and your business development side. And again, you are such a strong, just a wonderful human being, strong woman, I was going to say, and wonderful human being that you got recruited out of that position, if I remember right, because of how you network and people, you make such a great impression. So tell us about that next move and how you're getting closer to where you are now.
So the next move came at a point when Kent Intermediate School District as an organization was in a bit of flux. So there were some things going there that were making it a little bit more challenging to stay. Still a wonderful organization and an incredible mission, but sometimes there are just things that kind of start to shift around you that make it feel like maybe this is not the right space for me right now. As you guys are probably getting the impression, I'm somebody that has shifted roles a lot. And sometimes that's a point of almost embarrassment for me because it feels like um, maybe there should be more of like a commitment. My parents are people that both worked for the same organization for 40 years, two different organizations, but they were both there for 40 years. And I kind of grew up with this sense that you'd start somewhere and then that's what you would do for your whole life. Um, but what I found is that there are wonderful things that you can take from place to place. And um, often organizations are better for having some different voices at the table than the ones that have been there for 30 or 40 years. Now, having people that stick around, that kind of longevity is an incredible gift. And anybody that works in any organization will tell you how much they treasure the employees that they've had that long. But I think there is some value to really listening to kind of what you're hearing in your head and what you're hearing in your heart when a place starts to feel maybe not right or a position starts to feel not right. Leaving the classroom was one of the most difficult transition points for me because I really felt like there was such honorable and good work to be done there, and it was very hard for me to walk away from it. But for my particular season of life, I had just had two small children. um they were babies and it felt like I was not balancing things very well, so I had to just kind of listen to that and take that moment to shift when I had the opportunity. And similarly at Ken ISD, it felt like there were some things that were maybe going on a little awry there. That felt uncomfortable to me. So I had an opportunity to move into a more traditional communications role. And interestingly, the communications field was in a technology, working for a technology organization. So very atypical. So I'm an English teacher with an art minor. And at that point, I had gone to through a graduate program at Michigan State University to learn about educational technology. But to be clear, that is very different than IT because IT is really the nuts and the bolts and the development and the coding that goes into making all of our software and hardware work, which was certainly not my background. But through work at the Ken ISD, I had worked with some industry groups. So just a quick point on if you have an opportunity to join a group or be a part of even just public groups where you have an opportunity to work on collaborative initiatives. It's an incredible way to meet people outside of your normal circles. I can't tell you how invaluable the relationships that I've made working with people, both professionally in my jobs, also personally, but a lot of times from volunteer efforts where, they just there's such value in seeing people that are willing to come in and work hard and stay dedicated to a bigger effort. Really, all of my opportunities to flex jobs have come through those networking moments. Sorry, Krista, back to your initial question. So from the Ken ISD, I took a role where I was sort of unofficially a translator for technology initiatives. So my opportunity now was to go from a space where I was going to work very closely with technologists that were either developing software or implementing changes to technology protocols that an entire organization needed to be aware of, need to understand how to make it work. For instance, one of the initiatives was, we're going to get rid of all the desk phones in this company of 8,000 people. So there are legacy people here who have had a phone on their desk for 30 years. And your job as the communications person is to make them feel comfortable with the idea that now they will answer their phone on their PC. There's a lot of great benefits that come with it. Help them see the benefits, help them be unafraid of this new technology, help them feel comfortable with the shift, which meant I did things like hosting headset open houses where they would come and try on headsets and decide which was most comfortable, or show them how to set up things on their phone so they could also answer their work phone on their personal mobile device, things like that. So it's one of those roles where you don't think like, gosh, I'd love to do that some days, but it was another opportunity where I got to sort of be a teacher, help to educate people about the changes, and also really make them feel comfortable with sort of the new way of doing business. So in that role, I was sort of described as somebody who brought the technology that last mile. So there were groups of technologists, brilliant people that worked for months and months and months and months to investigate the technology, implement the technology, and make sure that it was ready to function at its highest um, ability. But then if nobody knows how to do it, or nobody knows it's changing, even if the technology is great, it can fall very flat. So they had decided that there was room for somebody in a communications education position to come in and help kind of get people over the hump, so that using the new technology was a very positive experience.
I think it's so great for young people to hear, Lindsay, where you might think it's, a negative on you that you change jobs, but I think for young people, there's so much anxiety that they have to make a commitment right now, and they're going to be at that same job for the rest of their lives, that they can hear from you that there is movement, there's choices. We get to make decisions on if we want to stay or go, that as we develop our careers, we gain skills, we develop a network, we learn about things that we never knew existed, that gives a lot of freedom for young people as they're making choices. And so I just think that's wonderful that that's the way it worked out for you, that you continue to be able to mix these two loves of business and English into these communication roles, into roles that you got to be a teacher, have a teacher's heart, but not necessarily be in the classroom anymore, which was one of those rubs for you. So that's just a fantastic. And I love the encouragement about volunteering and getting involved with different groups of people, because again, you never know where that's gonna go. So as you moved in this communications role, and really what you're doing now, help people understand again what kind of your typical day is like, if you have one, and what are some of the things that you love working for a large international company. Again, going back to that original global interest that you had way back in the beginning, is that meeting some of your needs now? And what else, I guess, if you want to help young people understand, what else should they know about your current role?
So the current role now, so I shifted even a little bit from then, where it was more focused on communications, and now I'm really in a training and education space. I will say COVID has thrown a whole slew of weirdness into the workplace. As you might have noticed, I am coming to you from my bedroom at home right now, because this is now my new office, and I have to be upstairs in a bedroom because I need to have a door that shuts, because sometimes there are small people here who are very noisy. So I have now set up my little desk space in my office, or I'm sorry, in my bedroom, something I never thought would be a daily reality. A few years ago, it was a big deal to be able to work from home for like a day. I mean, I had to run it by my boss and see, do I have his permission to be home on a Tuesday? And it was like, it was such a gift. I just would always feel, obviously as a teacher, you never work from home. Like that's not a thing pre-COVID. Now there's some of that. But that was never a thing that was like available. And I just found it was one of those pieces of balancing my life and my work that really helped me to just feel a little bit more grounded, was to sometimes have a day where I could just be in comfier clothes in my own space. That was a big deal. And now, interestingly, I get to do this every day, all the time. The downside of that is my desk is always right here, easily available. Sometimes it does make it more difficult to separate home and work, because home is work and work is home, and all the things sort of have collided. But I found that I love to work from home, and I'm very happy to do it. With regularity. The downside is it is more difficult to build deep relationships with colleagues. Some of my colleagues are new since I have been home from COVID. We've hired people in, and that makes for a very strange transition when you are meeting somebody for the first time over Zoom, and then you can certainly build rapport, and in many ways, using video conferencing is you know easy and it's great, but it's funny because you just don't have some of those like casual good mornings and walk up conversations that really do help to deepen relationships over time. So that's been a really interesting thing. I would say my work day, when I took this job, so training and development specialist. So again, I was thinking this will be a role that will allow me to be a teacher and also be a in business. We work with a lot of Amway is in nearly every country around the world, so we have a great variety of global affiliates. And with regularity, I'm chatting with colleagues in Japan and India and Korea, Vietnam, Thailand. So really amazing perspectives that are coming from around the world. Obviously, nobody's traveling, so some of my dreams of international travel are not coming true just because that's not a thing that we're doing. And honestly, I think that will shift quite a bit, even as business returns to a more normal state. Um, I think because a lot of companies have proven that they can be very proficient without spending the money to send people around the world several times a year. Um, I think the expectation will be to continue to work that way, and maybe travel on a much less frequent basis. So that'll be interesting to see kind of how that plays out as more of the world has access to the vaccine and things. Um, but I will say I spend a lot of time in front of my computer right now. Some days my step count is literally laughable. It's like I had like 80 steps all day, because it's just like run to the bathroom, run to the coffee, run to grab something out of the fridge for lunch. But like at the end of the day, I just right before this meeting got out of a 3.5 hour meeting, so I haven't stood up um, till almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon from when I sat down at 9. So that's pretty weird. Something I bought a height adjustable desk so I can at least like go up and down and physically stand up, but still not moving. So there are things that are not ideal about this every day in the life, but my work is really around training our sales force to be better familiar with our products and our business, and helping them understand how to be most successful at Amway. Um, I was hoping, one thing in my mind when I took this role was that there would be more of the actual teaching, the facilitation of content. Um, a lot of that has had to do with COVID, but this job does not require as much face-to-face interaction as I'd hoped for, because like I mentioned before, that is something that really fuels me. And that is something that I miss so much about being in the classroom, is just being able to go back and forth and share ideas and get energy from each other. So I would really pay attention to the things that you feel when you feel like, man, that was super awesome. I felt so good in that circumstance. What is it that gave you that energy? And try to look for those patterns now, because I have found that those things don't change that much, no matter the role, no matter the position. Being able to identify the things that bring you energy. And even if you feel like it's a small thing, be aware of it, because then you can be much more intentional about making sure that it is a part, at least, of the role that you're signing up for. And I think you'll find that, even if you don't get to do it every day, if doing it some days is an option, it will bring you a lot more satisfaction with that position.
Yeah, it'll give you that balance that you need. Like you said, for you, not having those face-to-face interactions is sucking some energy out of you, whereas that's what fueled you in the past. So absolutely. And some of it's circumstantial, like you said. But
Absolutely.
as young people, as you guys are hearing this, to be thinking, man, I really loved when I did that XYZ project, or I loved when I got to help that person, with that situation. Like, really start to take note of those highlights, like Lindsey said, because that is such an important part of career development that I think often gets overlooked, that the clues are really there, if we pay attention to them. And so to document those, ask people around you, what do you think that I'm good at? Or what have you noticed that I seem really excited about when I'm doing it? So just get other people's feedback too. So Lindsey, it was so helpful to hear your journey, and that I think the best takeaway is that there is an opportunity for movement and choices, and to keep growing and learning. I think that's just really inspirational for young people. The 30 minutes always goes so fast, and we're done already. We're at that point. So as we finish up, Lindsey, many young people that are watching this are trying to figure this all out. So if you have any other just final word of wisdom, as an encouragement to them, I don't know what might come to mind, but that's kind of where we'll finish up.
The last thing I would tell you is, don't be overwhelmed by the weight of the decision. The next best step for you is the right step. It's not the last step, it's not the only step. And sometimes you might stay in one place for just a moment, because you'll realize very quickly this was not the right step. This was a logical step. This was a step that was available to me, but this is not right. And when you realize that, don't talk yourself into being committed for any amount of time. Do the job that you are asked to do while you're there, and try to remain positive, even if the situation maybe is not ideal. And then just start looking for that next right step.
It's such great advice, and very practical, as they start off with their journey. Students, to get some more of the nuts and bolts of careers like communication director or communications manager, use onetonline.org. It's such a great tool to get the nuts and bolts of a variety of careers, and it's such a great exploration tool. So I just want to give you that website as a resource as we finish up. And Lindsey has been kind enough to offer up her email. If you're watching this and you're like, man, I'd really like to know if I could even do a job shadow, or maybe what kind of internship opportunities are out there, and you've gone to the Amway website and maybe still have a question, here's her email. So lindsey.tilley@amway.com. And again, our website, careerreadiness.kentisd.org, has all sorts of programming to help you learn more of what's out there, just like Lindsey shared with us today. My email is kristaharmon@kentisd.org. So feel free to follow up with me as well. Lindsey, it's been great having you today. Thank you so much for your valuable time. And I look forward to talking with you soon.
All right, take care.